And when you start with the Muller, once you mull it, it'll like the consistency will completely change and it'll also become like way too wet and like soupy and like liquidy because you added too much oil. So you have to add the oil like really slowly, you know.
So how does that change your process? I imagine that mixing your own pigment is going to change the paintings that you make.
There's a couple things on that. I mean, it's everything in a way, you know, I think it's everything for me, the paint, you know. I think it's the whole thing. There's a few things about that. I mean for one thing, I guess the first thing I noticed when I first started doing this, started doing it in grad school. Okay, so you buy colors like in a store, you know, like Williamsburg brand paint or whatever, Old Holland or whatever golden paint or something, and you squeeze it out and they're the different colors like on the spectrum, you know, but they're all kind of the same. I mean they're different in terms of their color, but that's what distinguishes them. They have the same globby, you know, type of physical
The
qualities. Yeah,
consistency is
exactly.
homogeneous.
Right, it's pretty uniform. Yeah, exactly. But when you mix it yourself, I mean, the first thing you notice is that each one is like totally, totally different, like to almost like an absurd degree that you would never be able to imagine. Like they have completely distinct physical properties because they're not just different colors, they're different physical objects, right? So like white could be made from zinc white or like titanium oxide. They're totally different compounds. They come from different places. They're just totally different things. And the way they take the oil, those two, is completely different. And there's like broad differences like between colors, but like within each color too, like just one pigment to the next, it's each one is completely different. And the way it takes the oil is very different. Like um how easy it is to work with, like the particle size, like the weight of the particle, the size of the particle. And so you just when you're working with it, and because it takes like an hour, you know, you're going like this with the Muller with like an hour, so you don't have much to to think about. But you just kind of notice, you know, what it's like, what each one is like, and they kind of have their own like distinct personalities, and they have their very distinct characteristics as objects, as physical objects. And so what you learn is that the color what I learned, you know, or what I noticed is the color is not just a visual difference, it's a physical difference. And so really started thinking of different colors as different physical objects. And that really changed the way I thought about, you know, putting color on a painting or using color to make a painting because it's each one is a distinct object. It's not really, in a way, it's honestly not as much about how it looks. You know, it's more about what it is as an object, each color.
So the colors almost have agency. It sounds
Hmm.
like, right? Like if you really understand like the properties, if you're really getting to know them, that kind of I'm sure you noticed they have a kind of a personality.
Yeah, that personality is a perfect word for it. Yeah, each one has a totally distinct personality. Some are very like cooperative, some are very like stubborn, you know. Um, and they're evocative of like all different kinds of things. But yeah, each color has a very distinct personality and just a distinct, you know, whole set of characteristics way beyond what it looks like. Um, and the other, so then, so that was so just in terms of like putting a painting together as like a physical object, the paint becomes as much a physical object as like the stretcher, you know, or the canvas, and it really becomes about like the scale of the objects kind of in relation to each other, you know. It really becomes about the scale of the objects in relation to each other, and that really kind of starts with the stretcher because the stretcher is first. But all those objects you kind of see through them at the same time, and they have to all um, they all work together in kind of the same way. Like so, and so once I started thinking of the paint that way, you know, I really, it changed everything. Like it changed the stretcher for me too. You know, like so I used to have, you know, in college I learned how to build a stretcher. You know, with like we'd put like a piece of cord around the edge, you know, to make like a lip to keep the canvas like off the stretcher. And those stretchers were like maybe like an inch and a half thick. They weren't really that thick, you know. But when I started making my own paint, I because the paint was such an ob became such an object to me, you know, on top, I really realized that I couldn't have a real thick stretcher. Yeah, it had to be real thin. The stretcher had to be thinner, you know, because if the stretcher gets thicker, it makes the paint on the top, it makes it more and more abstract. It makes it less and less of an object. The thicker the stretcher, it like flattens out whatever's happening on top. Does that make sense? So, but a thinner stretcher, it kind of um, activates the physical scale of the paint that's on top of the stretcher more, so that then you can see the paint as an object more clearly in relation to the object that the stretcher is. If the stretcher is like less of an object, you know what I mean? So I had to reduce
Mhm.
the stretcher so that it could have a conversation with the paint that was an object on it. So that's why now my stretchers are all since then. Since I started making my own paint, I started just leaving the lip off, so they don't have a lip.
It's
So when you
about
look,
an inch.
yeah, about an inch
Yeah.
now. Yeah, they're like one by three, made out of one by threes, and so there's not much to the stretcher. So that when you look at the painting now, you can see the stretcher because there's no lip. So there's like a rubbing of the stretcher, you can see like the grid and all on there. But that's not why I did it because I didn't do it because I wanted to see that grid there. That's a side effect but I want it to be thin, because the scale of the paint as an object in relation to the stretcher, as an object. But that's a big change, and people always it's something that's noticeable, even that came from the paint. You know what I mean? Even the stretcher itself came from the paint for me.
So it's like this, the stretcher also has agency in a sense.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. The stretcher's the beginning of the whole thing. Yeah, because the stretcher sets up the scale, and the scale is everything, The scale is the particular size of it and also the dimensions. I mean, it doesn't sound doesn't sound like much. It sounds very basic, and it is because there's not much else that's all painting really is. But it's the scale in relation to you, It's the scale in relation to you, to when you look at it, and it's hard to overstate um, how important that is. And I think that scale is kind of how I mean, not to sound too grandiose about it, but I think scale is kind of how we understand the world. It's how it's how we create meaning. And so, like, for example, like, I read somewhere once, which doesn't surprise me, but that if you average the smallest size thing that we know of, and the largest size thing that we know of. So the smallest size thing we know of would be like subatomic particles, very tiny, maybe superstrings or something that could make up quarks that then make up, protons and stuff. And the largest size thing we know of would be like the universe, very vast. But if you average those sizes together, um, unimaginably small, unimaginably large, you get the size of a human, of a person, which is not, of course you do, right? Because we're the ones who we're the ones who have identified the size of the universe, the size of the smallest
Yeah,
thing. So everything's in relation to you, right? And that's why it's so important with the painting. You know what I mean? Because we're very, 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 very sensitive. Like say you're talking to someone, you're very aware if that person's like a half inch taller or shorter than you. Scale is a huge, huge difference, like in our experience. And that's where a lot of like under the hood, I think that's for any kind of painting, not just an abstract painting, but for any kind of painting, I think that is a lot of how it generates meaning and value and experience for us too, is in terms of the scale. And where does the scale come from? It starts from the stretcher, but I really think it comes from the paint too. Obviously, it also comes from the size of the brush in relation to the stretcher, the size of the brush mark in relation to or the size of the things, shapes or figures or whatever depicted on the canvas images. Um, but all those things contribute to it, and you relate to them because you yourself have a scale, as the viewer.
absolutely. Yeah, I'm glad you say this because I'm working on a sort of a riff on Fra Angelico's Annunciation.
Oh
That
yeah, I love
that
that painting. I
it's
love
just
that painting.
it's a
Yeah,
I mean it's just so good. It's
yeah,
so good.
beautiful painting. Yeah.
It's such a beautiful painting, and I'm doing it basically at the same scale. I wasn't gonna, but I
Oh,
made a
you're making
can.
like your own version of it or
Yeah,
something the
yeah,
same the same size. Oh, that's a great
yeah. The
idea. I
same
do that all
size.
the
Yeah,
time.
yeah,
I do that
yeah.
all the time. Yeah, I do that all the time. Like I have a painting now in my studio. I went and down to the Resnick Foundation. I
Oh,
like
cool.
Milton.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah, yeah,
like him a
yeah.
lot. I mean, I like Milton Resnick a lot.
Paint maker, right?
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
yeah. So there you go.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. No, you're right. And well, actually, it's funny. I found out because I was talking to the guy. Milton Resnick bought a paint making machine, because he got really into it. And I'm just doing it by hand, like the way like Rembrandt's assistants
Like a three
would have
roller
done
mill
it.
sort of thing.
He bought some kind of mill, exactly, because he had like a loft, down in where
Like Soho or somewhere.
Lower East
Yeah,
Side,
yeah,
where
yeah,
the museum is now. It's in his old
yeah.
studio, right? So somewhere in there, I guess he had a paint making machine. I guess he was in Soho too at one point. I don't know where the paint making machine was. But anyway, so he had this paint making machine. He was just throwing all kinds of stuff in there, pigment and turpentine and household chemicals and stuff, and making paint. And So, but then he got arthritis, right? He got arthritis, and that's when he stopped making those really great Milton Resnick paintings, that are so good, so good. But he couldn't do them anymore because he got arthritis. So he had to start making small paintings, then he couldn't do his paint making machine anymore either because of the arthritis, right? So he gave the paint making machine to Karl Plansky. Karl Plansky studied with Joan Mitchell, but Karl Plansky is the guy who started Williamsburg Paint.
That's
And he
right.
started Williamsburg Paint with the paint making machine he got from Milton Resnick. It's
That's
kind of
right.
kind of a cool
That's
story,
right.
yeah.
That's so
Isn't that
cool.
funny? Yeah.
That's so cool. So
So yeah, so anyway, I saw this Milton Resnick painting and I was like, I want to, and the dimensions were incredible. So I'm like, I want to, and I couldn't make one that big in my studio, but I scaled it down. I
how big
scaled
was
it
it?
down. It was like, I have the catalog somewhere here, but it was too big to get, because I got to keep it under 90 inches on the one side to get out the
Yeah.
door of my studio, and his was bigger than that. So it was
Yeah.
like 100, over 100 on both sides. But I scaled it down to the biggest thing I could do and I made a painting, based on that. And I do that a lot. If I see paintings that mean something to me, I'll either blow them up or down, but the scale that comes from it has to come from something. And for me, I often find that it's really good for me to not determine the dimensions myself, right? It's better if I didn't come up with it myself often, but it also can't be arbitrary. It has to mean something for me. So something, like that, if I see a particular painting that means something to me in a particular way that I want to respond to, I can use that. And if I can't use the exact ones, I can at least use the same scale, the same relation between the height and the width
D
mathematically.
do you also factor that into the design of the painting, the composition, and so on, and how you approach the start of the painting, perhaps?
So yeah, so all that comes from the stretcher, and really where I think it actually comes from is the room too, the size and shape, because the scale extends to the room that I'm in, and you spend a lot of time in your studio, and I have a really nice studio. It's just a room in my house, and it's not that big, but it's a very nice shape and a nice size for making paintings, and my paintings kind of fill them up. My paintings kind of fill up that room. You know what I mean? They're the biggest, more or less, they're the biggest things you could do in that room. And that turned out to be a good size, and it's a good size in relation to me. I mean, it's bigger than me, but it's not like monumental size like these Milton Resnicks or, big Clipper Stills or Jackson Pollocks. Because I don't have a loft, like those guys have. But yeah, so it comes from I know it comes from me. I'm not really sure aware of how it comes from me, but I know it comes from just the size of me and my body parts and what I can do and how I can reach things. And it definitely comes from the room. But when I'm actually looking at it and deciding what to do, it really, what I'm aware of is that it comes from the stretcher, because I've got the stretcher that I built for whatever reason, either based on previous paintings I made, because I'll think, oh, I should try one a little taller or wider or something, or because I saw, Milton Resnick or something. And I got the stretcher, and then I put the canvas on it, right? And then once the canvas is on it, rabbit skin glue, and then oil prime. And then once the oil primer is on there, um, I can look at it, and because of the stretcher, just because of the stretcher, because the dimensions of it and the size of it in relation to me in that room, I can look at that, and I can see basically is it generating a space, or is it an object, and it'll be one of those two usually, and depending on which one it is, then the question is, well, what color, or what type of paint object, I really should say, would be appropriate to go on there, how much of it, given the space or the object that it is, how much of it, and then in what way would you put it on? And I just kind of follow along like that. So it totally comes from the stretcher. You know what I mean? I'm just kind of following the stretcher as best I can once I get that stretcher made.
Could it be both a space and an object?
Yeah, that does happen. Yeah, yeah. So that's what happens. So it usually starts off as an object, or space, right? So if it's starting off as an object, I feel that what I'm doing is I'm kind of describing what that object is like, right? If it starts off like an object, I'm just kind of describing what that object is like. And that's what I have like words for all these things that I came up with
I,
with big
I
things.
read that. You have a
You
lot of
read it,
writing.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it gets a little nutty, I guess, but I came up with it, and it was helpful for me, especially when I was starting out. But those would be like bump paintings, right?
Yeah.
So if it starts
Yeah.
off as an object, I'm describing what that space is like. So it's sort of like a descriptive process, but what essentially you're doing then is you're taking the object and you're making it into a space, right? You're exploring the space that's within that object. Or the other way, if it starts off as a space already, I'm just indicating that space. I'm just kind of like holding that space down and indicating the space and saying there's a space here, which is essentially um, making the space into an object, right? And that's like a pointing painting because you're just like pointing at the space and saying like there's a space here, indicating it somehow. But yeah, so they always are both, but they usually start off as one, and I my thought my I feel like what I'm doing is I'm expressing it as as the other thing that it also is. If it starts off as an object, I'm showing that it's also a space, and vice versa by working on it.
How important is it that the viewer understand some of that, some of those
Not
some of
not
the
at all.
approach? Yeah,
Zero. Not at all.
yeah,
Not less than zero. Yeah, it doesn't matter
yeah.
for
That's
the
yeah,
viewer. For the viewer.
yeah,
Yeah, no,
yeah,
because it's the
yeah,
pay. It's all just for me. It's all just for me because it's what I need to help me make a painting. This is
yeah.
all just for me to help me make a painting.
Like
Things that I've
it's the
identified that I need to
framework.
do.
Yeah,
Yeah, so that I can
yeah.
make a painting. So that I can because that's what I need to do it. Like some different artists need different things. Subject matter, you identify what you need as an artist to make the painting, and then there's the painting, and then you're done, and then the viewer and the painting have nothing really to do with you. Is how I see it. It has nothing to do with me, anymore.
I like that. You said that you saw yourself as sort of a studio assistant to the
hmm
paintings.
I really, yeah, and I do feel that way. Yeah. Yeah. So I feel like I don't feel that a painting that I make is really like an expression of me or honestly has much to do with me. Sometimes they look sort of familiar, and I think sometimes, I mean, you think you can often tell they're made by the same person, but I don't feel that they express something about me or that I have anything to teach or share or anything like that. I think of it very much the other way around, that I'm trying to find something out or trying to learn something, from the painting.
They
And
do
I'm
have
just
the
there to follow, I'm just following the painting as best I can.
they have that feel that comes out in the paintings. I
Oh, you
get a
think so?
sense.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
absolutely think so. I feel like there's a real spirit of exploration and discovery, and I get a sense that you don't know what it's going to look like at all.
I have no idea. Yeah.
Yeah,
What it's going to look like. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But they're beautiful. But and
And I don't even know what it's
seem
going to, but I don't even know what it's going to be. It's more than
mm,
I don't know what it's going to look
yeah
like, but I don't even know
who it is.
who it is, what it is, but I
Yeah,
want to meet that person, you know. I want to meet that person. And then it's like you meet the person, the painting, when it's done. And it often feels very strange, and foreign, but then maybe something about it, um, you feel like, there's something about it that you recognize, but it's totally, you know,
Alien.
alien. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Totally alien, but sometimes there's something you recognize. It's like meeting anybody, like I could meet you and talk to you and, I don't know you, but maybe we have something in common or something. It's like that, with the painting. I really do see that like that, like as a type of a person.
Is it like a first contact moment when you first realize that this sort of thing is this other? I I mean, I guess you could call it a consciousness. I don't want to anthropomorphize necessarily, but
Oh, yeah, I'm
but
not afraid of anthropomorphizing it. I do that. No, I do that a lot because, yeah, I'm comfortable with that actually because I do think that I didn't start making paintings until I was in college, and I just wasn't exposed to it, when I was younger, growing up. Yeah, and I grew up in the country. There were no museums. I mean, I went to museums a little. I must have gone like once or twice, but it wasn't a big part of my life. I didn't know anybody, who was an artist or anything.
where'd you
And
grow up?
uh, upstate New York, in the Finger Lakes area, like in the is where
Like
I.
Lake George, that area?
No, no,
Or
that's the Finger Lakes would be like
oh,
Seneca Lake, Cayuga
okay,
Lake,
further, like closer.
south. It's further south. It's like the middle of New York State. Like Lake George is further north. They're very pretty, but where I grew up was really like the woods. I really grew up like in the woods. Um, and so so I went to college and I was interested in I thought maybe I'd done a lot of like acting and I thought the one form of art I knew about, well, I knew about books and like movies. I thought maybe I would do that, like make films. But I was a philosophy major, and I ended up doing both art and philosophy. And at a certain point, I sort of had to decide what I was going to do, after college. And I thought I should pursue one of these two things, more seriously, and maybe go to grad school, for one of them or something. Um, and I had
Where did you go to
been
undergrad?
a Brown in Rhode
Yeah.
Island, yeah,
Yeah.
and so I did both those things there, philosophy and art, and and I was, painting, and I had done in philosophy, I had been doing a lot with uh, um, philosophy of mind and the mind-body problem, a lot of that type of philosophy, metaphysics and all. And it made me um, it made me realize that what I realized what I realized from doing that was that I really came to feel quite strongly, and I really came to believe that it's a mistake to actually separate mental and physical states. We distinguish between, and that's really what the mind-body problem is. It's like we've got mental points of view, mental states, that's mine. And then there's also physical objects of the world, and these seem to be these two very fundamental and totally different types of existence. And what do they have to do with each other? And that goes back to Descartes, the mind-body problem. And we could talk about that, like for hours, because that's people spend their lives, and they have for like hundreds of years working on that. But I really came to believe and feel quite strongly that that whole thing just was that it was wrong to draw that distinction, that it's wrong to draw that distinction because I felt that both, um, for one thing, it seemed to me that we ought to be able to, if there's a like a important aspect of reality or what it means to be alive or the world or something, we ought to be able to like really experience that thing like here, while we're alive. And the parts of our experience should all they all seem to me to have value. So if we say like, oh well, the mind, and this is what people usually did, they usually say, well, like we can solve the mind body problem because we'll say that usually what they did is they'd say like, well, mental states can be reduced to physical states, so anything that we think of as like a mental state or like a point of view or an emotion or something or a thought, we can describe that. If we knew enough about physics, ultimately we could describe it perfectly in terms of positions of particles, in the brain, you know, and we can reduce it all to neurochemicals and things like that. But there were some people then who do the opposite, and they say, well, things that appear to us, there's a tradition of this, idealism, things that appear to us to be physical are really just all mental properties, because it's all in God's imagination or something, and there's actually no such thing as objects and whatever. And I just felt like both of these were sort of seemed like cop-outs, because I felt like, well, we have both these types of experience, and why should we? It seemed just very like devaluing of either of them to deny them and say that they're really the other one. Like, why can't we have both? And so the more I thought about it, the more I really just became convinced that there is no actual way to distinguish between them, but that we just do that like sort of out of laziness. And I think we do it because of language. I think the way language works has a tendency to enforce that separation between objects and ideas. Because if I say, for instance, if I say like chair, there's the word chair and then there's the chair that it refers to. And there's always this like strict distinction between the referent and the thing it's referring to. You know what I mean? They can never be the same. And so every time we use a word or any kind of language, we're kind of like constantly reinventing and constantly reinforcing this distinction, between mind and body. And so what I realized was if this distinction is the problem, which I really think it is, then doing philosophy is only making it worse. I'm just perpetuating this problem that I learned about in philosophy class. I learned about it there, but doing the more I do philosophy, the more I'm making it worse. But I was like, well, is there something? And then I realized there's something I'm already doing that already kind of assumes the, lack of distinction between mental states and physical states, and that's painting. So I was like, well, I'll do that instead, because it's prior to language,
Mm,
where the mental and physical haven't been separated yet, you
I
know,
see.
in a painting. So that's why I chose that one. I chose the painting for that reason. Yeah. So yeah, so I'm very comfortable with the anthropomorphizing because I think that's true. I think a painting denies that distinction, or exists prior to the distinction between minds and bodies, and I think that actually people do too. I think that people do too, and I think that's almost a definition of a person is something that is at once both mental and physical, without without being able to reduce one to the other or separate them. And I think the same is true of painting. So I'm very comfortable referring to paintings as persons for that reason, because I think they meet that definition of a person. So I think a painting is a person that, in almost the same way that you and I are.
I agree with you there. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, for example, in Buddhism, an advanced meditator might say, what are you in terms of your body? Are you your
Mm.
clothes?
Hmm.
Are you your
Right.
mind? Are you your thoughts?
Right.
Are
Right.
you
Right. Right.
your all this stuff? So in a painting too, it's not just the one thing, right?
Right. That's right. Yeah. Yeah, because a painting's an object, right? But it has a point of view. And we all accept that about paintings. No one questions that. We all realize it's a physical object, but we all also understand it to have a particular point of view, which
Yes.
is a mental state, and people are that way also, so
Yes, absolutely. And I
yeah.
really appreciate that you consider all the various, just I can get a sense just even just looking at your paintings that every element is considered almost, would you say equally?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I mean, I know that. I mean, there's an order that it goes in because you do start with a stretcher, so I'm very aware of that it comes from the stretcher. But yes, I would say that the different aspects of the painting all participate. I guess indivisibly. Once the painting is done, you can't really separate them anymore into the components. Even though that's how you have to make it. You
Yeah.
make it one step at a time, but at the end you have to take it as a whole.
Yeah. It's just like a
Um,
person, right? It's
just
like
like a person.
you've got
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
the brain,
Hmm.
you need a brain to get your body around places. You to get the skeleton, which is if you didn't
Yeah,
have
that's
that,
right.
if you
That's
didn't,
right. That's right. That's right. That's right. It's all the person. That's right. Yeah, you have to take it as a whole, and that's kind of
yeah.
interesting too. Like, there are certain like things that can really only be understood holistically. And those things are much harder to understand. It's much easier if you can break something down, like a car engine, you can break it down into its parts and understand each part and how they fit together and understand the whole that way. Things can be that admit of being analyzed, right? That admit of analysis. If you can analyze something, that's a much easier way to understand it, and we're used to that just because of I think school and a lot of that's how we're used to learning. And drawing, I think, is kind of like that. I think drawing can be analyzed, but color, speaking of color, color really can't be. Color cannot be broken down into parts, the way drawing can. So color has to be taken all at once as a whole, holistically. And then I think that's why color for me is the main thing. Everything for me comes from color, as opposed to drawing.
So you don't really draw.
No, the drawing, well, there's always drawing, but the drawing for me comes from the color.
So when you're making a painting, you will let the color inform the composition, the structure, the
Yeah, the
drawing.
color determines everything. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, the first of all, the stretcher, right? And then the color comes
Hmm.
in reaction to the stretcher, because they're just objects in relation to each other. But yeah, the color is going to determine the drawing as opposed to the other way around. And I think that's pretty unusual. I mean, I do think that's basically true of Matisse, also starting with color, like letting the drawing come out of the color. But I don't think that, we talk about history of art, generally the color or generally the drawing comes first and like sets up the space, and then the color kind of activates the space. So when the color is good, generally it's because the scale is good and the scale is specific and all because of the drawing and the space that it sets up, and then the color can be activated. That's usually how it goes. You know, even for like Bonnard, I would say that's how it goes. People talk of it in terms of color. I really don't think it is. It's really drawing, and then because if you see his black and white pencil drawings, they're just as colorful. They're just as good. And but the color is activated by the space that he sets up. But for me, it's really the other way around. The color comes first, and you know, the drawing comes out of that.
How about like color field, like somebody like Rothko? Wh-
Oh, Roscoe, yeah. Yeah, you would, huh. You know, it's funny you say that because Roscoe's not someone I've actually thought about that much. Um, Color versus drawing. You would think, so maybe this sounds weird, but you would kind of think that, the color comes first also in Rothko. But I actually don't think so. I think with Rothko, it's still being activated by the drawing. I just think that for Rothko, the drawing is often the edges of the stretcher, you know,
Hmm.
like the size of that object that he's responding to, but he's still treating that like as a drawing. I think so. And if you look at his earlier paintings, I think you can see the draw developing like in terms of drawing, you know,
Yeah.
coming from Gorky and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting how influential Gorky was, and you don't hear about it a lot, you know. But if you
It's
see
true.
a lot of people's early paintings, de Kooning too, you know, a lot of people, the Gorky is all over the place. I wish Gorky's someone I wish I could see more of his paintings. I haven't seen like a big Gorky show. I would love to.
Yeah, that'd be great. So what are some big who are some big influences for you as a painter?
Yeah, you know, I always say, you know, there were like kind of like a few like big museum shows that I saw like at formative times. Um Big that I learned like specific things from, you know. So there was a Yves Klein show at the Hirshhorn that I got a lot from Yves Klein, and his book also was very good. And then once I went to Spain to the Prado, and I saw a lot of Goya there, and the Goya also is very important. Yves Klein Goya. Also, also Paul Tech. There was a show at the Whitney at the Breuer building. And also Andy Warhol. Those four, I guess. I always say, you know, for my biggest, like, which helped sort of, I guess, people who kind of helped me get, develop my work at different phases, you know, at different times of my when I was um, um, trying to, you know, do something, you know, with my paintings. The Warhol was at the Brooklyn Museum that I saw.
I would never guess those.
Those four,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it was different reasons for them, you know, specific things about different each one. I mean, I guess I could go down the list here. So like Goya, right? So like well, because he's the oldest, isn't he the oldest of the people I said? I think he's the
Yeah.
oldest, so it
Yeah.
makes sense to start with Goya. So Goya, you know, for me, coming out of Velázquez, right? And Velázquez is so great, you know, but I mean, one of the reasons I think Velázquez is great is um, so much comes from him. So much comes from Velázquez. I thought it was very interesting looking at the Goya at the Prado because I was also thinking about Manet. Manet also coming very much out of Velázquez, you know, looking at Velázquez all the time. But they're almost kind of taking opposite lessons from the Velázquez. And the Manet direction, I think, has been much more well, in a way, it's been much more influential, but I think it has also I kind of think it has also sort of run its course. I mean, I really like Manet, you know, but those two guys, Goya and Manet, I think drew opposite lessons about the relation of image and object from Velázquez, you know. And so with Goya, you know, he's got images and all kinds of stories and stuff, but they're very much interpreted in terms of being objects. You know, the Goya it's so much an object when you see it in person. You understand it as an object first, and then the image is you know secondary to its status as an object, whereas Manet is starting, and I guess it's probably also because photography is coming along at that same time and all. But Manet, I think, is one of the first people to conceive of a painting, which is an object, right, which is made out of paint and stuff and canvas and all, to conceive of it in terms of image first. You know, he conceives of it in terms of an image, and then its object qualities flow from the are come out from the image. Like the image is his reason for making it, and he's motivated by image. You know what I
Mm.
mean? And then the object is secondary to that. Now he's the first person to do it, so he's still making like real paintings that are really grounded in materiality and all because he's first. But I think that that idea of starting with image and everything following from that, I think it's just kind of I think it's actually kind of a narrow territory because an image is a very abstract thing and it's an image is really a purely mental object. um it's not, it doesn't inhabit space in the world, it's not instantiated in the world, it's just an idea. So there's not much to it, in a way. An image is kind of like a flimsy thing, it's just an idea, and after a while it's the same as any other idea, and all the images are kind of the same, and you can see this if you have a computer, or go on, social media or something. It's just images, and one is the same as the next. So I do think that that direction has gotten a little, has sort of run its course, and it's kind of has exhausted itself, by now. Whereas the object can't exhaust itself, right? An object is inexhaustible because every time you see it, it's an actual encounter between you as an object and this other thing as an object, and it can't be. The thing about that encounter is it can't be. Um, First of all, it can't be anticipated. It can't be anticipated. You have to be there. You don't know what it's going to be, and you could go back the next day, and it could be totally different. It inhabits that actual time and space right there, and so it has to be the real experience, and the real experience is always going is just much more generative than it contains ideas, but the ideas can develop and grow and change. Whereas a flat idea that's not instantiated, which is what image is fixed. It's fixed and it can't develop. It can't change. It's fixed. And it's very limited. You know what I mean? It's much more finite. It's much more finite than
What
than an idea that's instantiated in an object, which can always change and develop because it's experienced in relation to other objects like you. So it's a dynamic process. Like if you walk around a painting, you see it differently. It's a dynamic. It always changes depending on your position, your mood, all kinds of things. Whereas an image is forever the same. It's very absolute. An image is very absolute, and so it's kind of boring.
it's more like a person, an object in that sense.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah, that's the same thing we were talking about before,
Yeah.
basically. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Totally.
Yeah. Where
Yeah.
an image is an abstraction, so it's like saying it's not like a person. Maybe it's more like a god or something. It's like an idea. It's not
It's not alive in the
it's
same
not
way.
alive in the same way.
Yeah.
That's a
Yep.
perfect way to put it. That's right. It's not alive in the same way. That's right. There's a deadness to it. That
Yeah.
is true. That is true. Yeah, because it's fixed. Because it's fixed, it can't change. That's death, right? That's death. Doesn't change. Whereas something's alive, it changes all the time. That's
Yeah.
you're right. You're right. Yep, that's
Absolutely.
right.
Absolutely. And I'm actually just I'm harkening back to your looking at your painting at the show at Fuentes, and you used a dioxazine violet.
Yeah, I had a lot of
Such a
vaccine. Yeah.
beautiful color, but it looks almost iridescent and it definitely changes,
Oh, right, right.
where
When you
you're
experience
standing.
it. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, it's funny. It's funny because I don't, not like I'm sitting around trying to do that, but a lot of my paintings are really hard to look at. I've
Yeah,
noticed,
but
yeah. And you photograph too. I can't photograph them, but yeah, they're hard to even see sometimes. I find that too because of the pigment and stuff, like.
you're working with the natural properties of the pigment in a way that you're letting it sort
Right.
of do its thing.
I'm letting it do its own thing. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's got nothing to do with me. Yeah. So it's getting continued in its like inherent mysteriousness of its own object, as its own person. That's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess it makes sense that you can't really see it. But frustrating. Sometimes I turn the lights on, off. Just try to see it different ways, but you kind of can't ever see it. You
Yeah.
can't see it.
Yeah.
Is that, yeah? Where is it? You can't see it.
Step back up
Yeah,
close.
right,
What,
right.
what
Yeah,
is it?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Kind of
yeah.
like a person.
But you can never really
Yeah.
know somebody. You can never really know somebody,
Exactly.
right? You can never really know them. You
Yeah. Who
can't.
are they?
You need little parts, little parts. little parts and they can change too. So you thought you knew them, but they changed. So
Yeah, and
yeah,
then
you
but
can't, you
you don't
can't,
know because you're
but because
changed.
you changed too.
You
That's right.
changed too. Yeah.
Because there's too many variables and they're all constantly changing. So there's no, well, it's kind of like the thing in physics, right? The uncertainty principle and all, but you can't know it because it's by the time you know it, it's not there anymore. So yeah.
I think it's very much true that you can never step in the same river twice.
Right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But
Um,
beyond that, you can't really be in the same place twice as well because your molecules in your body are changing too. It's not just the river that's changing, it's you.
yeah, that's right. That's right. That's right. That's right. Yeah, and you in relation to the river. Um, yeah, that's true. Yeah. Yeah, it's a dynamic thing. But once you say, oh, it's just this image, you've removed it. You've removed it from that context because now the molecules and stuff are no longer part of what the image is. So I can look at the same image on my computer and on your computer, and it's the same image. But that's not true of any object, right? Even if I manufacture, even if I'm Jeff Koons and I manufacture two sculptures to very high degree of exactness, with the specifications and all, so that they look identical, and weighed the same and stuff. They're still two different objects. They're still two different objects, and they can't be in the exact same place at the exact same time because they're two different objects. So necessarily the experience of them will have to be different. Have to be, even if I put them next to each other. One's on the left, one's on the right. So that my experience of the one on the left can't be the same as the one on the right because this one's on the left, this one's on the right. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
But an image, a pure abstraction, is doesn't have that kind of inherent complexity. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's language too. Language is abstract like that too, like an image. Um,
Do you think language has a way of flattening thoughts?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, yeah, I do. I mean, I love language and reading books and all. But it's not the same as what we're talking about. It's not the same as something that's instantiated as an object. It doesn't have that um available to it. Language doesn't have that available to it. It has all kinds of other things available to it. A book does, because that's a physical object, but I'm talking about the language in the book, is
Yes.
abstract,
Yeah,
it's abstract, not like the book is.
that's right. It's a representation of something.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
not
it's just an idea
not
you
the
can have
actual
in your
thing.
head. Yeah, there's something about these ideas, these pure ideas that you can have them in your head, like even if they're difficult but there's something about it. At least it at least has the potential to be totally mastered and dominated by you, right? And an object can't be. An object really can't be.
Yeah, it has
Um,
it truly does have agency. I've
It
never thought
evades
about
you.
yeah.
An object is
Yeah.
always going to evade you, no matter how well you know it. You can't know the whole thing because you can't see all sides of it at once. You can't know the whole thing. But an idea you at least potentially could. Um,
I think that's why it's so important to see art in person.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
You
for
gotta
sure. Yeah, yeah, for
yeah.
sure. Yeah. But that to me is what makes painting so special too, because we are talking about it being a person. And painting, I think, is really very special because most of what I was saying would apply just as well to sculpture. The sculptures are
Hmm.
physical objects,
Sure.
and paintings are physical objects too. But the thing about painting, though, is that yeah, it is a physical object like a sculpture. That's true. But if I were to ask you what is a painting, you would be able to proffer some sort of description, and that we would all recognize. So that's what a painting is, right? It's like a sort of a flat object that usually goes on the wall, right? With the one dimensions way less than the other two. Like the thickness is usually way less. Because if it weren't, then it would be more like a box, stuck on the wall, like Donald Judd or something. Um, but if I were to ask you to do that with a sculpture, what can you say? Other than it's some kind of physical object. That's really all you can say. You know, you can't describe what a sculpture is supposed to look like, especially nowadays. Maybe,
Yeah.
a long time ago you could, like a long time ago, like hundreds of years ago, maybe you could have, but not anytime recently. You just can't, there's nothing you can say. So there's no form for a sculpture. There's no identity. There's no form. So a painting has both, right? A painting has it has all the unpredictability and like generative power of a physical object like a sculpture, but it's also got a strong mental form. It's got a strong mental form like things that we almost like a film does. Like a film is not a physical object, but we can describe what a film is. It's a sequence of images and sounds. And a painting is both. A painting has like, whereas the sculpture has no like mental form at all, right? I can't describe what it is. It's only a physical object. But painting is both. Painting is both, right? So it's got this strong like form where we know what it is, and that fits it into history and all kinds of things. But there's this all this mental awareness of what a painting is, but also inherent unpredictability from it being an object. And I think that is part of why painting is able to be so much like a person. And I think in some ways more than a sculpture because you know because it has this mental form, but also it has the physical object side. Um, whereas we kind of know what it is, but we also don't know what it is.
Mm. Mm.
Like when we don't know what any particular one is.
Right. Yeah, if I said painting, you would know that you would have an
Right.
idea in your
I
mind
have a
that
generic picture in my head. Yeah,
it's
exactly
this
right.
kind of thing.
Right, it's this
And
kind
so
of thing. Yeah.
so were these the kind of thoughts that were you thinking these things when you were when you were starting your career as a painter in undergrad? Were you considering this, or
Um,
did this come later?
well, I thought a lot about the mind-body problem and all the philosophy stuff a lot because that was my, training and stuff
Hmm.
in undergrad. And I probably thought about it too much, but because none of that's really that helpful for making a painting.
But it seems, but actually, it seems like it is for you.
Well, eventually maybe it
Yeah.
was. Yeah, eventually, but not when I was starting out. Because you try to because
You're,
to make a painting, because it's a painting, right? It's a painting. It's not an idea. It's not a philosophy. It's a painting. And so you got to look at other paintings and make paintings, you got to look at paintings and make paintings 'cause it's a painting is what it is. And so only is that took a long time, looking because I hadn't looked at a lot of paintings. So I had to look at years of just looking at, that was the big thing is looking at paintings. Um, like the people I mentioned and lots of others too. And then for my paintings, I I finally, I had a hard time. I could make a good painting, when I was young, like in grad school or just finishing grad school. I could make a good painting like sometimes, but it just was I couldn't tell why or how, and like most of the time it'd be terrible, or not very good. And I could even tell it wasn't good, and so I was destroying them. But then sometimes it'd be good. But I've been looking at paintings so much and like really trying to study them, really trying to study them like in museums, like the people I mentioned and other people too. And so I just decided to just do that same thing with my own paintings. It's like I'm going to just study them and I'll start making them. I destroyed everything, in the studio and I started again. I'm going to start making them and I'll just kind of watch myself make them and study them and like try to see how it works. And that's where this whole thing with like bump paintings and painting and pointing paintings and stuff came from because I just identified certain ways of being of different kinds of paintings like that I could make. And that was very helpful to me, that helped me. And it also helped me realize that and so each painting has to be its own painting, and it will always have relationships to other paintings, but the way that they look is really not important. So some paintings might look this way, some other paintings might look that way. It's completely fine for me. I'm not interested in generating a recognizable, style or something like that. That's not interesting to me at all.
So
You know.
it sounds like this is like during grad school that
Yeah, or
you sort of
after, or the few
became,
years after. Yeah,
you
exactly.
got
Yeah.
more confident in the process, which is, it sounds like a very healthy process where um, you're not worried about the product, the end,
Not worried about the product. That's
yeah,
right. Yeah. Or especially not worried about
the
what
result,
it looks
yeah,
like. Yeah,
yeah,
what it looks like. Not worried about the result or what it looks like. Yeah, exactly. Just trying to understand what it is. Just trying to understand what it is. Yeah, as best I can, as best I can. And learn something, from it.
yeah. It sounds like that requires a sort of like an openness, and you just an open-mindedness and a sort of spirit of exploration.
I think so, I mean, because you don't know what you're going to get, you really don't. And it could be anything. And to me, that's actually very exciting. I want to see what I could learn or what I wouldn't have thought of. I like the paintings, my own paintings. I like when they surprise me, or I don't understand what they are, and I try to relate to them or learn something.
What are some of the things you learned from your paintings?
One thing I think I have learned from them actually is some things about time. That is one thing I think I have learned from them because that especially starting with color, and with the object, starting with the object and the color, and then just following it along as best I can and seeing what it is because I'm trusting that it's a person and it'll teach me. I do think that there's a sense in which color can give us time, or color is a way to access time. I think there's almost an analogy. It's something I learned from working on paintings, and thinking about them and stuff. But I think there's almost an analogy between drawing and space. Like if you look at the history of art, I think a lot of it is the attempt to kind of understand space or kind of conquer space in a way, or achieve some kind of mastery or over space, or some to possess space, to kind of trying to possess space through drawing, and almost like an attack on space through drawing. And it goes through different methods of drawing that they align themselves with historical periods and stuff. But I think there's this like need to kind of like have space, or know what it is that you can kind of use drawing to achieve, like use drawing as a way to actually have space, understand space. And I think there's an analogous way in which color can do that with time, but it's much harder to describe with color because, like I said, mentioned before, color can't really be broken down or analyzed, and drawing can. And I think time is much trickier thing than space, because I think we have to have a sense of time in order to have a sense of space. The time comes first for us, conceptually, in how we experience life, and we can't. I don't think we can really. It's very hard for us to actually experience time directly. It's like too fundamental. It's too fundamental to our experience to actually to know what it is. I don't think we have a very good sense even of what time is. We kind of infer that time has happened because we see that our hair turned gray, or we got older and stuff, or the tree got bigger and things like that. Somebody died. But it's hard for us to actually experience time, or to actually feel that we have much of a handle on it. You know what I mean? But I think that color can help with that, actually. It's a little hard to describe, but that's something that I have learned. Yeah.
Do you That's good. That's good. Do you think that there's an analogy, like is it analogous, like in the same way that we can't really understand time, we have the experience of time. Do you think that we can't
Mm.
really understand color, but we have the experience of color?
Yeah, I do. I do think so. Yeah, I do think so. Yeah, I think you just have to take it, holistically at the color.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I do
It
think so. Yeah,
it seems to be fundamental.
that's right. Yeah, it's fundamental. Yeah. So it was a thought experiment, like what's the guy? P.F. Strawson, some philosopher from Britain. But it's like you can imagine a world with no space. You can imagine a no space world, and it would be a world of like pure sounds, basically. Um, so like there, if you close your eyes and if so, like basically, with the sounds that we hear, we do attribute spatial qualities to them, right? Because that sounds like it's far away or whatever. But if you think about it, if you've only ever heard sounds and you never experienced space at all, those would just be all you would have is just it's louder or quieter. There, you wouldn't need an analogy of space at all to understand, different sounds and stuff. But it's really hard to imagine a world with no time, right? Like, what would that be? It would be nothingness,
Nirvana?
I get nothingness. Yeah,
Yeah.
nirvana, or just like a
Yeah.
single thing that never
But it's
changed.
not a place. We can't really
It's
conceive
not.
it.
It's exactly. It's nothingness. Yeah. So I think that the fact that we can't imagine it shows that we shows how fundamental it is, and that's why time is so tricky for us to get a handle on it. We can't, if we try to mentally remove it from our like mental apparatus, we can't do it.
Hmm.
We like short circuit ourselves, and it's like death or something then for us.
Hmm.
So,
It's,
but I think we want to have time, right? I
of
think we want to
course.
know what it
Yeah.
is, and it's a big part of life, and it makes us very sad. And and I think that's the gift of a painting too, is you can stand there, or any great, any good work of art. I think it's true. You can stand there, and you don't, and you can just have that. You can just stand there and not do anything, and not think about anything. And you can it's kind of like giving you the gift of time for the moment that you're with that painting or whatever it is, the artwork, you can just experience that. And if it's good, it holds your attention. You don't have to think about going grocery shopping or picking your kids up or picking your nose or, or what that person looks like or what you're wearing or something. All these, you can just have, and I think that's the closest we get to an experience of pure time. So I think that's one of the gifts of, making art. But I do think there's a special relationship between time and color, but it's hard to describe.
No, I understand. Yeah, no, I'm trying. I think I understand, I should say, but I do see the connection between looking at great art and making art and time as well.
Yeah.
Like there's an experience where time just evaporates. It sort of melts away, and
Right, right,
you're
right,
making a
right,
painting.
right, right, right.
It seems like it changes the art making, especially. It seems like once you get, I guess you could call it a flow state, right? When you're really invested in
Yeah,
something,
yeah.
you're kind of you have a different sense of time.
Well, color for us really comes from, I mean, what it really is it's our experience of light, of like wavelengths of light, and that actually is also what time is in terms of like physics, right? It's like the movement of light like away from like the Big Bang. And so that's kind of like that is kind of the closest to our direct experience of what like time actually is as time would be described by like a physicist, that is our like pure experience of light, which is no one really even really knows what time is, but if time is something, it's like it's the increase of entropy following the Big Bang. You
Movement
know what I
within
mean?
space,
Movement, increase in chaos is what time is essentially. Like according to like a physicist, it's the gradual increase in chaos. Like the Big Bang, there's no chaos. Everything's perfectly organized, and it gets more and more chaotic
toward entropy,
toward entropy. Yeah, that's
right?
right. So it's that movement towards greater entropy is time. And we know that and study it and understand it in terms of light. In terms of light is how we know. And the light that we can see is color. So I mean that's kind of like one, it's sort of half-assed, but that's kind of
No,
like
I got
a
you.
connection
Yeah,
between time and
yeah.
color. But I think
Y-
I do think there's something there. But this is also the kind of thing too that I do kind of think it can't really be described,
In words, right?
But yeah, in
I
words, yeah.
do you ever think about colors that we can't perceive?
All the time. Yeah, all the time. Yep, all the time. Yeah. And so and I did make some landscape paintings, but that's a big yeah, that's a big thing for me is like the density within a color or like the feeling of it, or I guess the meaning of it, that is beyond how it appears or beyond how we're able to understand visually. Because there's a feeling that there's something there, and I think that that's true in general, that we things that seem especially important to us are often things that we can't quite grasp or that we know that they're there, but we can't see them or know them. And I think some of that, honestly, for me, does have to do with like the density and darkness of like a forest, like where I grew up, like under these like hills, it's very dark, very dense, and it's hard to see, and that things are there and it matters, um, but you can't know it, but you can feel that it's there kind of. And I think that that is part of the feeling of especially like a big painting, and I like big paintings, is that you can't quite see them, at least not all at once, but you kind of feel them physically more than you can see them. And I'm very interested in colors too. Like it happens in shadows and things a lot. There's a color there, but what is it? And it's very interesting to try and decide. When I make a landscape painting, that's the most interesting part, especially in the darks, because it's a color, but it's hard to see, and it could be purple. Very often I think it's purple. I think maybe because I just like purple. But purple is interesting to me. But but there's something there, and you're never gonna know what it is, but you feel that it's worth knowing, you know.
Yeah, it's like what's the color like in a sunset or sunrise? There's all this going on
There's
in the
something in the
gradient.
color. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's certain colors, or combinations of colors where you do feel that there's something that you can't see, which is, I guess, is kind of interesting too, because it's color is supposed to be visual, but to me it's really not, it's really more than that too.
I think
And
it's
it's
vibrational as well.
yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah. And people have said like, well, art, art's like a visual painting's a visual art, but to me it's really not, like it's kind of funny, but the way that it looks is almost like the last thing on my list,
And so
that
it's how it feels.
yeah, yeah, it's how it feels. That's right. That's right. Yeah. Yeah, the way it looks is really actually like secondary to me, I actually kind of don't care how it looks. And very often I don't even look at them, when I'm working on them. And I like, the natural light and stuff in my windows, and it'll be dark or something and I can work on it anyway and I can hardly see it, and it kind of doesn't matter.
You're just
And
feeling it. Yeah.
yeah, and I've often thought, well, that's good because if I go blind, then I could keep making paintings, like 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 Monet, so I mean, hopefully I won't go blind, but if I were to, I think I would still be able to make paintings.
Did Monet go
I do think
blind?
so. He did, yeah, yeah, yeah. And by the end, that's when his paintings got really good, when he went blind. It's kind of like Beethoven going deaf, but when he went blind, his paintings got better, so that's something, that's comfort right there in case you go blind.
What phase are we talking? Is
Oh,
that
for Monet, oh, the late, the
the
late
lilies, the
ones.
water lilies?
Yeah, I think he's going blind by then. Oh, for sure. I think so. Yeah. I don't know if he
I
went totally blind, but yeah, he was going blind by the time he did that. Yeah, or losing his vision. Yeah.
I could stare at those for days.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
could just
totally.
but
Yeah.
you're not
Do you like
I
those
can't
late Monets? I
I
like them
love
too.
those.
Yeah. Yeah, me too.
I was just at MoMA and I saw the
They're
room
great. Yeah,
the
they're
room
great. I mean, yeah, there's a reason why they're
it
so famous. They're so good. They're so
it's
good. Yeah.
alive. They're
And they're
alive.
very dense. And they're very
Yeah.
dense, and you
Yeah.
look at them and you can never know them, and I think there's a sense in which from Monet too, the way that it looks was not his main motivation, and some of that's because he couldn't see. And it didn't
But
matter.
you do really feel them though.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's
I never
right. You
thought
feel
about it
them.
in that way. Yeah.
And the size of them too, the size of them too. Yeah.
You're in them.
Uh-huh. That's
You're
right. Yeah, yeah.
absorbing this feeling from those paintings.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, for sure. And you can see it. You
And
can see it when you go to a museum. I love to look at the people, and you can see them having that experience when they're not, I mean, when they're not on their phone.
doing the selfie thing, yeah.
When they're not on their phone. The the
Taking,
the, the
we're taking a
1% that are not on
selfie.
their phone, but
I
those are the people
know. I know.
who aren't on their phone, who are actually looking
Yeah.
at the painting. And you can see it. It makes a difference, and you can tell, the people are affected by it and affected by being in the space. You can see it in their body language. It's very interesting. Yeah. And then those people become part of the art. I really believe that then. So
They activate it.
they're actually part of the art. They're actually part of
Absolutely.
the art. Yeah. The space between the paintings becomes, if the painting is good, the space between the paintings becomes part of the art. The people looking at it becomes part of the art. The room becomes part of the art, and the art expands and it flows out, fills up that whole room. And it can go, potentially forever, but it usually stays in the room where it is. But
That's
yeah, the
good.
people the people themselves become part of the art.
Yeah. And I think you make a great point as to why art is so important. It's the thing you can't really
It
articulate.
is that. That's right. That's right. Yeah. Yeah, there's got to be more to life, right? There's got to be more to life.
Yeah.
There's got to make it worth living. To make it worth living, it can't just be these things that we do all day. That's not enough. That's not worth, that doesn't make it worth getting out of bed, it really
Yeah,
doesn't.
there's more.
There's got to be more. Yeah. And
Yeah.
but I think we know that there's more. We feel that there's more, but um it's hard to make time for it.
Yeah.
But a painting gives you the time,
Yeah.
or a good artwork gives you the time.
Yeah, that's a great point. It
Yeah,
slows down time. It
that's right.
dilates
Yeah,
time.
that's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
Yeah, and you
yeah.
have your stuff, your stuff you have to do, and then you've got this and then that, and you step into the studio. Not always, but ideally you are sort of removed from the normal sense of time.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I feel that way about working in the studio. Yeah, but I mean, I have a schedule that I have to follow, so I know how much time I have in there and stuff. But it's the time in there is not the same as time anywhere else. That's very true. That's very true. Yeah, and it's very interesting too because that's a fascinating thing about making paintings too, is like you could make a great painting like in 1 second. I've made paintings before, like in really like a half a second, took me to make it, or like years and years, and you just don't know. You just don't know. And each one is different. but that experience of time, it's not divisible from the object, from that object. You know what I mean? The time is bound up in that object. And so you can't just take the same time and plop it onto the next object. It's going to be a whole new experience of time with the next object. Like the time and the object are the same. And you can't know that until you go and do it, you know?
This reminds me of a conversation I just had with my friend, who actually Alex Udzen, a great, wonderful artist who was just on the
Oh,
podcast, the last episode of the
I've met
podcast.
him. I've met him
Hey, you
before.
met
Yeah.
him? Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were talking about durability
Well, okay.
and how certain objects in time, like you look at like historical paintings,
Right.
we look at like Hans Memling, or these are the people that I'm into right now, like
I like him
Oh,
too.
he's so
Yeah.
good. He's so good. Northern Renaissance. I've been really
Have
on
you
this
been? I haven't
new.
been to the Frick. I haven't been to the new Frick. Have you?
Oh, is it open now?
Or I think so. I
Oh
think it's
yeah,
open. Yeah,
yeah.
it's
I
already
heard it
open.
was.
Yeah.
I gotta go
But
there.
yeah, I like
Yeah,
the Mendling there. Yeah.
yeah. That's such a wonderful collection too.
Yeah.
But that stuff. Why is that stuff? Why are we look? Why are the how? Why have those sort of like withstood the test of time? Why are those so durable historically?
Hmm.
Those
Memlings in particular, or just any great like old painting, like a
like
Duccio,
yeah,
or yeah.
exactly. Stuff you see in the Frick.
Stuff you see in the Frick. Yeah. I mean, okay, so I think there's probably a lot of reasons, but for me, I mean, there's a certain value that those kinds of paintings really embody, which to me is specificity, and so the great thing about specificity is it doesn't tell you what to do. You could do anything, but it just says whatever you're going to do, just do it really, really specifically, whatever it is. So it doesn't matter really what it is or what it looks like or something. But I do think that those things that hold our attention, like over great amounts of time, like the things you mentioned, I do think they're highly specific objects. They're highly specific objects, and I think they're highly specific objects in like lots and lots of ways. So physically and mentally, I think they're very specific. Culturally, very specific. And those are the things that people often talk about. But I think physically, as someone who makes paintings, you're interested in like how to do it, like under the hood, like making something. Physically, they're very specific, and that's what I tend to notice. But I think they're highly specific mentally, socially, culturally, in all those ways. And it's not a coincidence because once you're specific, because the physical and the mental, again, are the same. And so I don't think it's surprising that if they're specific in one way, they're specific in other ways too. And other things that I think are more generic culturally, generalized culturally, or more aestheticized culturally, also are probably more aestheticized or generalized physically. And those things would not have that kind of durability.
That
I
makes
don't think
sense.
so.
Yeah,
I don't
no,
think
that
so.
makes sense. Yeah.
And I do think certain historical periods are also probably more conducive to that kind of specificity, and other historical periods. And if you look at history, there are certain historical periods, it seems like there's a lot of interesting things happening, and others we don't have as many, artifacts that we still look at from those time periods. And I just think that there's something maybe more generalized about some historical periods and some things more highly specific about other, historical periods.
Hmm.
Um, so
Definitely. And
yeah,
I recognize that there is obvious cultural bias on anybody who's viewing these things and anybody who's choosing them to be
right.
viewed and so on.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah.
But there is
Yeah, because you
something,
can't separate yourself from the, context that
the
you're
context.
from,
Yeah.
because
I
that's
mean,
you. That's
yeah,
who you are.
exactly.
Where did you come from? And that's part of who you are.
That's right.
And so there's not much you can do about that. But I do think that, it's kind of interesting because I was listening to I like CDs, and I don't have this probably won't come as a huge shock with what I have said, but you'd probably think I have only a vinyl or something. But
I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah. Yeah.
original tapes, or actual live musicians. But I have CDs, because I'm from that time period when CDs were big, and I just never stopped, So I have like 800 CDs or 1,000 CDs or something, and I listen to them. But I want to listen to them all, but I don't want to have to decide what to put on, because that's like a whole thing and it takes a lot of time, and you end up picking the same thing. So I just put them all in order, like chronologically, and I just listen to them all, and then I go back
In
and
order.
yeah,
Ah.
chronologically, yeah. So I'm in like Beethoven now, I just happen to be in
Ah.
Beethoven, but I have CDs from like last year too, but it goes from like the year 1000 to like last year. I have, like I said, 1,000 CDs. So, but I just listen to Beethoven now, and I'm listening to Beethoven, and there's so much like German like folk music in it that I just noticed, And if I was more of a musicologist, then I would already know that, but I'm not. I'm just a casual music guy. But I'm noticing all this like German folk music, and I don't really know what it is, but it sounds almost like drinking songs or something, like folk songs, German,
Like polka kind of, or
not polka, but it's very German sounding, super German sounding, and it's just very folksy sounding.
huh?
Almost like Dvorak or something, but it's German. But it's in like the Ninth Symphony, and you wouldn't expect it there because the Ninth Symphony is so famous, and so universal, right? It's like we put it on the spaceship and we sent it to outer space, the Ninth
Yeah,
Symphony. We
yeah,
did that
yeah,
in the 70s. Somebody
yeah.
did that. What's the guy? I forget his name who did that, but the guy in the black turtleneck did that. And
Oh,
Carl Sagan.
Carl Sagan. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
he's like,
yeah,
let's put
yeah.
the you put the night. So,
Of
but
course you
so we
would.
think of
Yeah.
it, we think of it as this universal thing that applies to everyone, but it's this very specific cultural context, right? German
Yeah,
folk music is in there. And so
yeah.
would anyone else care? It's not their folk music, but we do care. I think precisely because it's so specific. I think precisely because it's so specific and so generally interested in what it is and where it comes from itself in its own context. And Beethoven's a German guy, and that's what he knew about. But I think he was so specific about it and so genuinely interested in it that the fact of the specificity itself becomes universal, even though the actual subject matter of it is not at all. It's very local and parochial, right? But
Interesting.
the fact
Yeah.
of the specificity itself makes it very universal. So that's where I think we can actually overcome our like cultural biases and things because we can appreciate all kinds of things because we don't know what they're about. But the more specific they are, almost the less we know about them. But we appreciate the specificity itself speaks to us. You know what I
Mm,
mean? It
I
speaks to
see.
us because it's a kind of a love.
Yeah,
Specificity is a kind of a love,
I think it's love.
you love it
Yeah,
enough, you love it enough to really care
that's
and to
it.
really do that thing,
Yeah,
to go all the way with that thing. And the further you go with that thing, the less it has to do with anybody else. But the fact that you're willing to do it connects it to everybody else because we all want to be loved like that
absolutely. I think
or to love. Yeah.
durability is directly connected to love.
Absolutely. Yeah. And art too, so
Yeah.
I do think that that's why w- we're able to, ideally appreciate things across, cultural contexts and stuff. And I don't think we're necessarily as limited as people say, like, oh, you're just you're limited by your own thing. And I mean, you are, of course, and you have to accept that. But the very fact that you're limited by it, I think also connects you to other people because we're all limited. We all are. We all share that in common.
Yeah, and I think art is really a shared experience, and it's really a
Yeah.
way that you can communicate and connect through this act of love.
Yeah, absolutely. Or like Proust is a great example too, right? Like I love Proust, but who gives a rip? These people are so obnoxious. They're so obnoxious, and they're in the Belle Epoque, and they're like horrible people, and it is very specific, and all their cultural norms and stuff are highly bizarre, right? And they go, oh, the way you sit matters, and way you hold your teacup, and the outfits, and what color are your gloves, and like it's ridiculous,
But
right?
Proust, but
But it's
Proust is so
fascinating.
yeah.
But it's
People are yeah.
fascinating. It's fascinating, and we can't put it down. It's so good, and we all relate to it, even though we totally don't relate to it, right?
But people are
At
still reading
all.
Proust. They're
Of
still
course, of
yeah,
course. It's of course because
yeah.
it's timeless and universal because it's so specific, because he
Same
actually is so
yeah,
inside of it. He's so
yeah.
inside of it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Same with like Dostoevsky,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Totally, yeah,
Tolstoy.
totally,
Yeah,
totally, totally, totally.
yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I like
Just
those
these
guys too. Yeah, I like those guys.
amazing.
Yeah, yeah.
I have confessed I haven't read Proust, but my
Oh
brother,
really? Oh,
people
it's
that
great. It's
I
great. Yeah.
I'm gonna read it. My brother and a close friend of mine are both like they won't stop talking about Proust.
Yeah, yeah, it's great. I
They
really,
I've
I really love it. It took me. I've read it a few years, like in grad school and stuff. I was reading it, but yeah, and it's a slow read, but I really enjoyed it. I
you
really
read it. You read
enjoyed
all
it.
three.
Oh, you
Oh,
read? Well,
it's three,
it's like
right?
seven,
Oh,
technically seven books, but it's one book. It's one book, and he wanted it actually to be printed all as one volume, but it would have weighed like 30 pounds. It
Yeah.
would have been ridiculous because like 2 million words long or something. So or more, maybe I don't know. But
Wow.
but you can get it in mine was in like a six pack,
Yeah.
and I really recommend this particular translation. Translation is really important. So
Yeah.
the original guy who translated is the Scottish guy, Moncrief, and that's a classic, and that's what everybody read. And so there's something to be said for that. But then he didn't have access to like the final proofs and stuff, and some of the grammar and stuff was a little bit off. So it's been like kind of like cleaned up and like revised and like emendated a couple times. And so That's the translation I recommend. It's like it's the DJ and write fix up of the, I think it's Kilmartin who fixed up the Moncrief. Like that's the
Mm.
original translation, but it's just been kind of like brought into alignment with like the original proofs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But the grammar, the thing is the grammar is so um Proust, I mean Proust is words and language and all, right? But the grammar, it's so precise. It's so precise and the sentences are really, really long, right? The sentences are so long um, and they're grammatically perfect, but they're very long and very intricate, and they're very difficult to read, right? And they're so difficult to they're difficult to read and understand, but they're very beautiful. But part of their beauty is in the difficulty, but they're also very clear. The clarity is very high, even though they're very like long, and I wouldn't say they're meandering, but they're just intricate and like nested clauses, intricate, and it hurts, but you feel your brain, you feel your brain when you read it. And so there's a physical sensation. So it actually kind of is for a book or for language, it's the most like physical experience of language you could have because it actually hurt my brain, and but that was the pleasure of reading it actually, because
Yeah.
you felt it in your body. Almost like with the painting, you actually felt it in your body,
So it's
even
like
though
a
it's pure
yeah.
language. It's kind of
Yeah.
amazing,
Oh,
yeah.
that's awesome. That's so
So Proust, I really recommend Proust, yeah.
it's like a prefrontal cortex workout.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's a
Yeah.
workout. Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
workout. Yeah, and
Yeah.
you want to savor it too. You want to savor it, so you read each sentence. At least I did. I read each sentence twice or more. So it's a long book, and I made it last like way longer. That
So
had to because I dragged it out.
yeah. Yeah. Who's like the Proust of painting?
Oh man, who's the Proust of painting? That's an amazing. That's a good question. I really don't know. I don't know if you can really compare painters to writers like that. Um, maybe 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 it'd be easier with composers or something, but
Like
I'd have
Vivaldi or
to
somebody.
I'd have to think about that. Vivaldi, I wouldn't say that Vivaldi is the Proust of painting. I love
Handel.
Vivaldi though.
Maybe Handel.
Handel,
I don't know. Actually, speaking of Handel, I
don't
saw
think Handel.
truly it's the same with music though. You the experience of hearing live music is
That's right.
so much
Hmm.
different. Yeah, it's the same thing with with art,
Yeah.
visual art. Yeah.
Oh yeah, live music. Yeah, it's amazing how different it is,
It's
right?
so
It's
much different.
amazing how different it is. And you wouldn't think, why is it so different? It's the same notes, right? It's the same notes, and you're hearing them in your head, but it couldn't be more different because it's about the space. So when you're in the music is coming from the room that you're in, because and we know it's very much affected, of course, just in terms of audio qualities, whatever I know there's more technical words for it, that by the space, the reverberations, and like how, live the space is and all this type of stuff. But you're feeling it from the space, like the space participates in the music.
Yeah. And really in your
It's
body.
an instrument. The space is
Yeah.
like an instrument, and
Yeah.
so and I do think that because you're in the space, then like you said, your body then too is part of the music. Like it would sound different if you weren't there, because the body's actually absorbed part of the sound. It would actually sound different if you weren't there.
Absolutely. Oh, you're right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
you're a part
So
of it.
you're
You're
participating
creating
in
it.
it. You're helping to
Yeah.
create it. That's right.
Wow.
That's right. You're helping to create it. Right. Whereas if it's a recording, it's a totally abstract, right? The recording doesn't care if you're there or
It's
not.
like an image on a computer.
Exactly. Yep. A recording is
Yeah.
flat like an image. Yep. That's totally
Yeah,
right.
it's
That's
not an
totally right.
object.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's good.
But the experience is an object actually in a way. The
Yeah,
live performance
absolutely. It
is. Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
is. It is.
Yeah.
I saw Handel's Messiah in
Oh, great. Great. Yeah. Yeah.
a couple years ago at the Philharmonic, and I'd heard it before, and I was like, oh,
At
it's
Lincoln
good
Center.
at Lincoln
Yeah.
Center, and
I
I'll
saw it at
never.
a church somewhere. Yeah.
It's amazing, isn't it? Just seeing it. I
Hmm.
mean, seeing it live, and especially when you get like people that are singing it like that,
Well,
and
that's the
then
thing.
they're
And you see what the
vibrating your
singer
body.
looks like, and they have
Yeah,
to stand up and sit down, and there's this, it's very interesting. Yeah, what they're wearing and everything. Yeah, it's very interesting.
it's amazing. But it
It is
changes.
amazing. Yeah,
Yeah,
it is amazing.
yeah.
Yeah, I love going to concerts. I wish I would like to do more of that.
Say, I mean, yeah, that's one of the sort of amenities, the luxuries of being in New York is that
Right, 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 right.
you have all the access to all this stuff.
Yeah, especially if you have time and money to go.